good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We're going to give it just a couple of minutes as we let some audience members roll in. We've got a nice crowd. So far, there's 64 of you online with us here today. So thank you for sharing that time. More and more of you are rolling in. I hope that wherever you are across the time zones that you've adjusted to the time change. Won't it be nice when that doesn't happen anymore? And that you're healthy and doing well, work is going well for you. And again, we do appreciate your joining us here today. In the background, I've got our office assistant, Amanda, who's going to be handling some behind the scenes stuff so I can focus the session with our guests that we have today, which I will go ahead and introduce in just a short minute. So we've got about 72 people online so far. There's people who are interested in financial report writing freedom, clearly. So I'm excited to have everyone here today. Let's get the show on the road. Amanda, I'll ask you to continue to admit folks into the room as they appear. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if I'll start off just by saying, if you're not here on time, don't worry, this is being recorded and you will have access to it again later. But let's get this show on the road. You should all be able to see my screen, which is just the opening slide deck of Financial Report Writing Freedom. You should be able to hear me. If you don't, you can go ahead and make a comment in the comment section of your Zoom screen, and Amanda will do her best to help you out. So without further ado, today is Wednesday, March 15th, and we are talking about financial report writing freedom with my good friend Peter Wright from Spire Assist. Peter is the president of Spire Assist and has been a Spire user for many, many years, as well as a consultant and a third-party developer, hails from the world of business vision. I won't say how many moons ago, Peter, but Peter, thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us here today. I hope you're doing well.
I am, Katie. Thank you.
Fantastic. Good. Wonderful. So I'm Katie Griffin. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Spire, which just means I do a lot of different things. So let me get through a couple of housekeeping items. I believe that everyone can see my screen and hear me clearly. I haven't seen any messages that you cannot. You access this Zoom through our conference virtual platform, which we are using to continue to do webinars for everyone. Attendees who are interested in verifiable CPDs will get some. You'll get one verifiable CPD after this session. Simply email us at info@spiresystems.com if you do require a certificate of attendance. That's our pleasure to provide that to you. We don't take questions during this webinar. This is really a podcast style webinar where Peter and I will go over the topic of today, financial report writing freedom, and some other tips that are designed to help you throughout your workday. But please reserve your questions because I'm sure you'll have some for your Spire consultant. You all have an authorized Spire consultant. Many of them are in the audience here today, so they'll be well aware of what we're talking about and what your question might be. And of course, that is your go-to person. So let's move on here. We take a look at the agenda. So really the concept of today is to talk about static versus dynamic. You're going to hear us saying those words quite a bit, and thus the financial report writing freedom. We're going to start off a little bit by my offering some very simple Spire tips that will help you answer that one quick question. If you are in the accounting department, you often get the knock at the door with that one quick question. So really taking advantage of the search and filter options, I'll just spend a tiny bit of time on that, and then we'll jump right into talking about static versus dynamic reporting. WYSIWYG, some of you may be familiar with that term. What you see is what you get in terms of report writing. And Peter's going to share with us a lot of tips and strategies on how you can create dynamic reporting with Breeze GL, which is Spire Assist, one of the tools that they have. And we are also going to take a look at user-defined fields and really making the most of those, along with another Breeze product that Peter has developed. Very exciting stuff. So here we go. So the one quick question, again, if you're in the accounting department, you often get that, hey, I just have a quick question for you. I mean, it'll also help happen in other departments as well, but often it's the accounting department. What do these questions look like sometimes? Well, they vary. I mean, there's all kinds of questions that one might ask you if you're in that role. But, here are some examples of some questions that you might get. How many clients in California but not in Beverly Hills, purchased about 5,000 worth of goods last year? Or, how many credit card payments are we expecting for accounts that are 120 days past due? What was that payment that we issued for $55,000 for again? And then how many miscellaneous vendors do we have? I know that it's not often that we like to have miscellaneous vendors in our system. We like to have actual vendors in our system. So sometimes questions like these come up. And so I wanted to just take a minute to be able to share with you guys just some things that I've put together here in Spire. So very quickly. So if you can confirm, Peter, can you see my general ledger screen?
No, I'm looking at one quick question.
Okay, let me go ahead and fix that then. And now you should be looking at my GL screen.
That's it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Peter. So I think one of the first things in terms of being able to answer that one quick question, whatever that question might be, is really setting up your grid for your role. This is very nicely handled in Spire. You can set up your grid so that you're looking at the columns the way that you would like to look at them. I personally am not an accountant, for the record, nor am I in the accounting department, in case it wasn't obvious. But I think that I like to see offhand which accounts are active or inactive, obviously the GL account number, the type of account it is, the name. So I just think for my purposes, this is how I'd like to see that set up. User permissions will also allow so that maybe some of the stuff is only viewable to certain people within your organization. And perhaps maybe there's columns that you don't want them to view as well. So setting that up is important. For example, we've got a user here in user settings that I have. His name is Tom Sawyer. He's obviously not a real person. But here we have his user settings. And let's say I just want Tom to be able to view. Right. So I can easily make those adjustments so that all he's really getting is the ability to view certain things and not the ability to change anything whatsoever. So setting that up is important. I'm just going to discard those changes right there. And then setting up by, again, preference of how you'd like to see things, because there's so many great features just built within the grid. The search is one of those features, really. So if I'm working in the GL, and I've got it set up the way that I like, and I really just want to see any accounts that have anything to do with marketing. Oops, maybe if I spelt marketing properly, that would help. Marketing and sales, for that matter, because I know that, and again, I have to spell and properly. Sorry about that. So really it comes down to one account that has that kind of information within it, whether it's the description or it's assigned to be associated to those categories. I want to see just that, because my actual accountant or bookkeeper within the office has told me that there's way too many marketing expenses. This is fictitious. She hasn't actually said this to me. But if I did want to be able to drill down and look into that with view access only, being not in the accounting department, I could do that. And then I could say, okay, sure, I'm seeing different things that are happening with those accounts. I'm looking up those accounts. Perhaps I want to see anything that's rented, right? Maybe it's your office location, or maybe it's other items that you're associating to a rental account that you have created. And again, not being an accountant, I highly recommend you always talk to your Spire partner or your accountant about how these things are set up in your general ledger. But all to say that the search option is quite nice there as well. Often we probably want to be able to see some transactional details, right? So that question about miscellaneous vendors, right? So I don't know offhand how many miscellaneous vendors I have, but if I were to type in the first few letters of miscellaneous and add the asterisk, which serves as a wild card, then the system will go ahead and search for any information that has those letters beginning in there. And if you see, if I take it away quickly, nothing's going to come up. And the reason is because it actually has a period in the description of it. But by adding that wild card, it'll cover anything that I need there. So miscellaneous vendors, and who have I paid that's a miscellaneous vendor? Spell that properly. And see, I've narrowed down my search just with that search option and using the wildcard asterisk to be able to answer that one quick question. Let me just go back over and take that out for a second. And I want to actually what was that $55,000 payment for that we had issued? Well, I have my columns exactly set up the way that I'd like them. This is in the transaction tab. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a sort. Just toggling at the top of your column will sort in ascending or descending. And if you just highlight a quick cell in there or a row, I'm going to just type in 55. And you can see that Spire highlights in green 55, and that's the transaction that I was wondering about. That 55,000 that we paid somewhere, what was that? Where did that come from? And I can quickly do a search using the search field and then further in a column. These concepts exist as well throughout Spire in sales and history, inventory, to being able to search with the search field, organizing your columns, all of that good stuff exists throughout various modules in the program. Okay. The filtering option, when we talk about ad hoc reports or we talk about, quick questions that need to be answered, is also a very powerful tool. I'm just going to go over to sales because I am a salesperson and I'm much more comfortable in that module. And I'm going to show you how in sales, I wanted to see how many customers have spent over 5K not in Beverly Hills. So I went ahead and I saved this. And you can see that I've added a bunch of different parameters on this query. Well, 3 really. The city is not Beverly Hills. Okay. The state province is California. And I want to see anything that is greater than $5,000. And so there we go. Quick filter. I was able to save that. Very easy to go ahead and save filters as you've created them. You can save them either just for yourself or company-wide. You can also save the order in which the columns appear. This is what we would refer to as a static report, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But it is nice because you can export that to Excel if you wanted to as well. In accounts receivables, for example, I might want to say, show me how many credit card payments we're expected to receive for invoices that are over 120 days past due. So the same thing, I've gone ahead, I've entered in those filters. The status is credit card payment over here because I've created a user-defined field for it. So let me show you what that is very quickly. If you're not familiar with user-defined fields, this is an incredibly powerful tool that I highly recommend you talk to your Spire partner about. It's quite nice in terms of what you're able to do with it. So from an AR perspective, I've created different statuses in terms of promise to pay. What kind of payments are you expecting to receive? Just to ask the audience to mute themselves. There seems to be somebody who's not muted, so please make sure that you are. Thank you. You might be receiving payments by electronic funds transfers, or perhaps you have clients that are on a payment plan, various different statuses. As we know in receivables and in sales, the follow-up date is key. And this is what's going to allow you to set the parameter of the next 30 days. What kind of payments are we expecting in the next 30 days? And the expected amount. The reality is clients may have a running balance in your system and not always pay the last invoice amount. Perhaps they're making, again, partial payments or whatever the expected amount payment is. And if you are a business that has high volume transactions in terms of receivables, a good collection practice is always very nice to have. And in inventory, for example, I want to know how many of my parts involve a chin up a chin-up bar, a chin-up thing. If you're familiar with Spire's sample data, it's all based around health and fitness equipment. Some of the shakes on there don't look so good, I have to say. But in any event, if you wanted to do a quick inquiry, so show me all of the product codes that, and this is obviously pre-set up in our database, that are accessories, because you can build accessories in Spire. Ask your partner if you don't know how to do that. Equipment and parts. So show me any of those product codes that also have the description chin in it. Now, don't put the asterisk in here. That is reserved for the search field up here. But let me see what we get. There we go. I've got all kinds of accessories and equipment that has something to do with a chin up, because maybe I'm doing a particular restock, or I want to do a particular sale regarding these items. And then one last thing in terms of filters, back to the general ledger for all you accountants in the audience. I know there's a lot of you here today. You can save, again, those filters. This is a simple balance sheet. If I wanted to do a P&L, I would simply, again, use my filters. I'm going to do type, and I'm going to ask for revenue and expenses, and ta-da, very simple P&L. Okay, so nothing that is ground shattering or rocket science here, ladies and gentlemen, but definitely something that you should want to consider organizing for yourselves in terms of your columns, maybe some filters, those quick questions. You have to know what you're looking for in terms of being able to answer that quick question. And again, I always encourage you to talk to your Spire partner. So enough from me rambling. Peter, I want to talk to you about static versus dynamic reporting. So some of what I was showing, like I said, was static, which means, I can't really design it the way that I want. I can set queries and I can work within what is available to me. And when we think about the general ledger and financial reporting, Spire does come with almost 200 different types of static reports out of the box, if you will. But by design, we're not always going to use the same kind of queries, the same parameters. And sometimes it's hard to imagine beyond the debits and credits what is in the GL. So can you kind of talk about what else is there and what we would want to see aside from the debits and credits in a dynamic report?
Sure, Katie. Spire has some specific ideas of what you might want to use them for, with its location feature. Allows you to have a segment in the general ledger, and all transactions for a physical location, a bricks and mortar location, are tracked with that segment. But there's also other business activities. Perhaps the sales side of your business versus the service side of your business need to be reported on specifically. For various reasons, which we will talk about. Perhaps things like management responsibility. You've got an area manager or the service manager versus the sales manager. So you want revenues and expenses associated with an area of the business. Things like ownership. You can have a shared ownership, and ownership of maybe only certain aspects of the business and not the entire business. Things like legal obligations. You've been given access to a certain customer base, and so how you report on that customer base needs to be done separately, so that you can maintain your contract with the person you're getting those customers from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So lots of different types of data at the end of the day, and not just those debits and credits that make up a P&L or a balance sheet. So it really depends. And most of these, again, this is static reporting that exists in the designed reports that are available out of the box with Spire. But I think what I'm hearing is ultimately it comes down to what you want to see, which would not always be conducive to the static reporting, to the management reports that are built in there. So we typically see the balance sheets, the income statements, consolidated GL activity, by financial statement period. These are all pretty common. But Peter, what would you say what's the biggest thing that people are looking for in financials?
Well, I think it's two things. It's changes and comparisons. You may not understand all of the numbers, but when you see a change in a number, that could be good, could be a source of concern, and you have to look at it. And also comparing two things, like two business units, how profitable is sales and service. So when what you're going to want to compare is going to vary depending on what those segments or those concepts mean to you. Is it bricks and mortar, or is it management, or is it ownership? And they'll be compared in different ways. And you're going to want to compare lots of columns together. If you want to do a month by month to budget this year versus last year and the percentage change, you could be talking 36, 48 columns on your report. Try printing that or outputting it to PDF and scrolling through it. So having a dynamic on-screen report is much easier to be able to compare the information, get down to what you're really interested in, hide the other stuff perhaps, and focus on what your concern is.
And we're going to take a little bit of a look at that in just a little bit. But so all the reports that are in Spire are built with Crystal Reports. Crystal Reports, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a report writing tool that's not exclusive to Spire. It's quite well known. It's been around since originally 1984. A gentleman named Terry Cunningham couldn't find a suitable report writer for DOS. For those of you who remember what that is. And since then, it's gone through various different versions and acquisitions. But Peter, you yourself have been working with Crystal Reports for how long now?
Since about 97. Wasn't my first report, but yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's the year I graduated high school, Peter. So,
Thanks,
but
Katie.
so you're welcome. You've been working with that for a long time, and it has its benefits. So when we talk about static versus dynamic, Crystal report writing is definitely static reporting. It's not WYSIWYG. It's not, freedom in that, but it definitely has some benefits. Can you talk to me about quickly some of the benefits that you feel exist in Crystal report writing?
Well, Crystal is the market leader for a great reason. It's an incredible tool. You can do just about anything in Crystal. And it also makes it easier for developers like Spire to be able to integrate. They have an API, and they have a developer like Spire can very easily give out 200 reports to their customers, and the customers don't need to know anything about Crystal until they want to come and make a change to a report, of course.
Their partners also sometimes do have experience in Crystal and the ability to write reports as well. But there are challenges with Crystal reports too, right? So Peter, tell me about some of the challenges that you've identified.
Well, first is the learning curve. Sometimes just getting Crystal installed, pointing at your data, and modifying reports with your data can be a bit of a challenge. And to effectively use Crystal, you need to understand the structure of the underlying data, the tables and relationships. And also you have to kind of think like a programmer. And not just like a top-down programmer. You can follow code by going top-down through it. But it's more like programming where you have to hunt around all over in subreports, hidden variables. It's a challenge sometimes to think, where does this number come from? And the logic is often buried out of sight, 3 layers deep, perhaps. Maybe it's in an almost invisible subreport. And I can honestly say that financial reporting, modifying financial reports for Spire, that is the hardest module to deal with. Things like sales and customers, it's fairly straightforward. You can understand it, but customizing a financial statement is complicated.
No, I definitely can agree with that statement. Again, not being in accounting or even a programmer for that matter, when I look at some of this stuff, it looks like it's a completely different language to me. And I think for most of our friends in the audience who are running their businesses, even if they are in the accounting department, does not necessarily mean they know how to write Crystal. So advantages and challenges with that static type of reporting, but a very powerful tool at that. So the opposite would then be the dynamic reporting. So that freedom to really drag and drop and customize and not be stuck to a certain format within a report. Let's talk a little bit about dynamic reporting. And Peter, with all your crystal experience and professional experience that you have, what do you feel some of the benefits of dynamic reporting are?
Well, there was always a frustration in static reporting about, I want to put this number here and that number there. In Crystal, that isn't always very easy. I want to design a report and put things exactly where I want. I want to cut and paste the data that I'm presenting and place it anywhere that I want. When I want to track something new, like a new group or a new segment, you might want to see them in columns on one report, but in another segment, you may want that below. But the generic reports, if you've got a segment report, every segment is a column. You cannot put well, it's much more difficult to put some segments as columns and some segments as sections in your report.
And I think it also applies nicely to have dynamic reporting, because not every report recipient necessarily wants to see it the same way, right, Peter? So how one wants to view data, depending on their role or what involvement they have with the company, doesn't always play itself nicely to static reporting. So I would say
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the more reports, so you need different reports for different people or different entities. So the easier it is to create, to take a report you created for one entity, kind of tweak it a little bit, and then give it to a new entity. The ability to do that easily is very valuable.
Quite nice, yeah, for sure. And I mean, aside from the the financial statements, the balance sheets, or the shareholder report that one would create, talk a little bit about what other kinds of things one can do, what other kinds of reports one can do with dynamic reporting.
Well, we've been using the word dynamic a lot, and another word that I like to use is interactive. So reports aren't just things that you print out or even just view on the screen. There's an example here that I've got about an HST remittance worksheet. So this isn't a financial report in the classical sense, although it does pull data from your general ledger. And you use this information, perhaps putting your own calculations in there, verifying some things. And then when you want to record those values permanently, you can copy them and paste them. So here we've got previous remittances, so we can compare our prior remittances. And maybe there's some footnotes or some special calculation for adjustment that you had to do. You can do it in Excel, do the calculation, leave a little note, and it'll always be there. So for that period, you made an adjustment for this purpose. Another good example of this type of interactive worksheet is something like fixed asset depreciation, where every year you're analyzing your assets and depreciating them based on set schedules. And those schedules change, and there's often some explanation or justification that's needed for those types of things. And so you can pull the data, analyze it, make your decisions and your calculations, and have a permanent record.
Yeah. Interesting that it's not just those P&Ls and things like that. So that leads me to think that it's really more than just maybe the CFO or the controller that needs access to interactive or dynamic reporting, as you put it. So I could see various roles, and I happen to know a CEO who actually has used Breeze GL before, and very much thought it was a great tool. So, but project managers, right? So when we talk about our chart of accounts and accounts having divisions in them, perhaps those are related to particular projects in one scenario. And so there might be a project manager that wants to use something like Breeze GL. But I think regardless of what the role is and who is the one using this type of reporting within the organization, I think there's a fundamental element of Excel that one needs to understand. And you and I talked about that a little. You don't have to be a guru, right? You don't have to be one of these Excel gurus, but a basic understanding. You had shared with me that one of your learning curves was understanding formulas. And so I did a bit of research, and I'll have you speak to this in a second, but basic 3 different types of formulas. I personally understand this. I do enough work in Excel that this makes sense to me, the relative formulas, the mixed formulas, and the absolute formulas. But Peter, tell me a little bit about a professional like yourself who had a bit of a learning curve with this.
Well, yes, I had to learn a lot about the Excel behind the scenes to code the application, but I wasn't a huge Excel user, and it's important when designing, when giving someone a tool, that you understand how they're going to use it, and anticipate what they're going to do. So yes, I actually had to learn a fair bit about this particular topic, and it's good to talk about it today because this is perhaps the most complicated topic you need to know. And this is actually a fundamentally basic concept of Excel that people know. And so when you create a report in Breeze GL, it will automatically put in what it thinks are the right types of formulas, so that when you copy a cell from one cell to another, it behaves as you're expecting it to. But dynamic
takes a bit of pressure off of us then. So that's good.
Well, you can learn if you don't know these concepts. If you look at the formulas that are included, you'll see it. And you just kind of copy what the template gave you and the concept that they gave you.
Right. And so we talked a bit about who is writing the report within the organization, who are the businesses or people that they would be, or entities that they would be writing the reports for. So either the business owners or shareholders, stakeholders, area managers, banks, obviously government. Some of our friends in the audience do receive some funding towards a particular item from different government entities, and then their clients pay the rest, let's say, right? So being able to have these dynamic reports available for the various different kinds of organizations are really great. Peter, I would like you to share with me what kind of report you've got building for us right here.
Oh, well, as you can see, Breeze runs directly in Excel. You create the reports and run the reports in Excel. There's a simple balance sheet, which is created for you from a template. There's printing it so you can make it fit on a page nicely. This one is income statement by location. So rather than the segments being down the page, they're across the page in columns, and we have the opportunity then to compare them to each other. Here's a budget to performance. And of course, Excel has this color coding feature. So you can look at the green is the positive and the red is the negative. And if it's a very large report, you can scroll it and the titles stay where they are. Basic Excel stuff. This is a multi-company report. ABC and Spire are 2 companies. And when I change the data is live in real time. So here's a quick generation of such a thing. I choose the company, I choose my template, I say what level of totals that I want and what account types I want, and generate the report. And that's how they come. So now we're going to just use our basic Excel knowledge that we already know. We're going to hide some columns and change the titles on some columns, clean up the little bits that we don't want to see, and add a new column. See, copy this column over to beside it. So we've got this year versus last year.
Look at
so
that.
You're using all the tools that you already know.
You make it look so easy. So share some tips with our audience today. Like, we just saw this great example of what you can do with interactive dynamic reporting in Breeze GL. But, let's say I don't know where to start. Okay, I don't know Crystal. I know Excel well enough, but what are some of the things I need to consider, Peter?
Well, the process basically is to create an example of what you want and work backwards from there. So you would preferably use a prior period where the data is not going to change. You browse your general ledger and retrieve a value and put it on the spreadsheet manually. Now you ask yourself, what information did I need to find this number? Did I need to look under a segment, or was it a group total, or what periods did I use? Make sure that the information that you use to manually find the value on the report is somewhere in the spreadsheet, usually on that row. So if you needed a segment, then on that row, you put the segment reference, or it might be in the column heading, in the case often of a period number. But if you can do it manually, then it can be programmed. So although this might be a bit time consuming, you don't necessarily have to do the whole report, but there's some advantages in doing this.
Yeah,
one is
an example.
Yeah, you've proven that your GL structure is sufficient to support this reporting requirement. You've recorded all the information someone would need to create the report. In fact, you've already started creating the report, because that will be used, that will become the final report. And you've got a way to determine how accurate it is when you've completed it. Does it match your template that you made?
You brought up an interesting point, and I'd like to just set some realistic expectations here for our friends in the audience that it's super important to consult with your Spire partner. I think what you had said is, if the information is there, Peter, because sometimes I guess when we're thinking about what we want this report to look like, we may discover that perhaps that data is not set up to be received.
Absolutely, that happens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking with your partner, making put all of your requirements as much as you know them on the table, and come up with a structure, because we're talking about multiple concepts often that you want to track. And there'll be different ways to do that. You might want profit center and location reporting. So how do you structure that most effectively, so that you can get the information that you need? So definitely talk to your partner. Yeah.
And maybe even your accountant. And sometimes, your Spire partner happens to be an accountant as well. And if they're not, then they can work with your accountant. You and I are not accountants. We're not going to start talking about how one CL structure is set up, but it is important to, obviously, if you want access to certain data to be able to report on certain data, that has to be accessible, is the point here. Okay, let's recap here. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we still have another little topic that we're going to talk about. So the tool that you have developed is Breeze GL, and it really is designed to allow for financial report freedom. Give me some of the highlights, why you love this product so much, Peter.
Well, it takes away the frustration of having difficulty getting exactly what you want. You put your cursor in a cell, you type the formula, that number goes there and stays there and gets refreshed anytime you like. So you put the numbers where you want, and you don't put numbers where you don't want them. You're working with a tool that everybody knows. Your CFO isn't going to learn Crystal, but your CFO will quite happily indulge in Excel. You can still use all the things that you're used to. You can still use macros if you're a macro guru. You can add your own columns and change the formatting. You can pull the GL data from multiple companies, which is, I don't know of any Crystal solution that where I've seen that work. Not without running it outside of Spire. I don't believe it's possible to run a multi-company financial statement from within Spire, or even design one without doing something fancy. And those companies can have different fiscal periods. They can have different charts of accounts. So if you buy two companies, they come often with a chart of accounts, and the numbering systems don't line up. And converting one chart of accounts and all its historical transactions to use a different structure of chart of accounts is a
big job.
It's a daunting task.
Yeah, big job.
I suggest you don't even attempt.
Not for the faint of heart. Don't try this at home, ladies and gents. So I think that it's such a powerful tool, and really enhances the report writing ability for the day-to-day user of Spire, and even Spire partners. Maybe the Spire user doesn't have the time to sit there and create this kind of stuff, and that's what they would really go to their consultants for. They are there to consult and help you with your Spire on every level. So this is very interesting. You have a client that is using Breeze GL. I think this is maybe some of where the necessity came to you from. I got a little story about kernels. I don't know how many of you know kernels in the audience, but once upon a time, I was a teenager, and like most teenagers, I used to hang out at the mall. Might have skipped a class or two, might have happened, but there was a kernels shop in there, and it was just my absolute favorite. So Peter, when you told me that your friend Penny Daniels, the CFO of Kernels, is using Breeze GL and how much she loves it, I just thought that's great. Maybe we can get some popcorn
I
because
know
she loves it.
my wife was expecting some free samples as well, but
Yeah,
didn't actually happen. But
right. So the inspiration for Breeze GL, tell me a little bit about that quickly, and do you have any future plans for Breeze GL?
well, a big thanks to Penny, because she had the largest and most complex set of manual spreadsheets that I'd seen for financial statements. So many locations, and different business units. So back when they used BV, they also used a product called F9. So when I saw what F9 did, you can see that there's a lot of, if you know F9, you'll recognize a lot in its concept, and even in some of its specifics. To be honest, I did steal a few good ideas from F9.
You were inspired, Peter, is what you were.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
So as far as the future goes, well, I've added everything I think people need, but the next round of feedback is going to come from users and partners. I'm very interested in finding out what enhancements people want. One of my pet projects is to expand the scope beyond the GL. The idea is to be able to pull a piece of data into a cell by using a criteria, which is basically what Breeze GL is doing. I have a working model of being able to do that for any table, for any piece of data that the API exposes, either on individual records or on bulk retrieval of information. So
well, let's not give too much away here.
Breeze
Peter.
API is coming soon to a Spire partner near you.
A Spire partner near you. Good. I like the way that you put that. So without giving away the whole farm here, Peter, I think that before you launch this other Breeze product in your suite of breezes, if you will, you do have another tool that allows for UDF management. And I talked a little bit earlier about UDFs. I showed a very simple example of how one can manage accounts receivables and promise to pays and things like that. And again, UDFs are global feature throughout Spire, are incredibly powerful for users. You can see them on the grid, but it's not always just a one and done with UDFs, is it, Peter?
Well, I've heard some people say that, but once they start using it, and if they're really going to use it to its greatest effect, no, it's periodic updates is quite common.
So in that AR example that I was showing, for instance,
that's a good one.
Yeah, so we set, credit card promise payments or EFT promise payments, but when those payments come in and the accounting department applies that record still holds that UDF data, right? And to go in and let's say we got 100 payments that day, just to go in and update all of that can be cumbersome. And maybe I can do better things with my time. So talk to me a little bit about what Breeze UDF would be able to do.
Well, when I started introducing customers to UDF and they found that they have to double click on a record, go into the UDF tab, make the change, save and close, go to the next record, compared to in Excel. Type something down arrow, type something down arrow, type something down arrow, or copy something and paste it down all the rows. So the idea is to make importing or updating UDF data as fast as possible. And again, using our everybody's favorite data tool, Microsoft Excel.
It is the most popular accounting software in the world, right?
Well, I think in one of my presentations, I had a quote. It's Excel's world. We just live in it.
We just live in it. That's right. That's right. I'm sure every finance person or anybody actually who works with computers, period, agrees with you there. We've got another little explanation that you've offered here for us. So tell me what we're looking at here with Breeze UDF.
Well, again, Breeze UDF, like Breeze GL, is entirely in Excel. You pick the template. It already knows about all your fields. It's showing you the details here. Your key fields are what you need to provide, like warehouse part number. And it's showing you the names of these fields and any validation that's going to take place. So here, from any source that you want, it's in Excel. You just paste in this case, the warehouse and part numbers. And I'm going to just type in data here. This is a shelf life of 400. So these are all products of a certain type that I exported from Spire. And I can delete the columns that I don't need, although I don't have to. And I'm going to validate. Now, so the red obviously indicates that there's a problem. I'm being told the rule there is that the maximum value for this field is 365. So I'm going to simply make that a valid field. Then I'll rerun the validation. That's what we want to see. And now I'll perform the import.
Ooh, look at that. You got the little Spire triangles up there on your import. Cute.
Yeah, I stole those too.
You borrowed them and you were inspired.
No, I'm allowed, right? I think I asked Al.
Yeah, you don't steal. Well, then it wasn't stealing. Come on.
So what's important is that everything is backed up forever, and you can restore. So something you imported 2 weeks ago, you can bring that back into Breeze UDF. Remove any records that you don't want to restore, remove any columns you don't want to restore. So it's a selective restore. And it's also not an all or nothing import. Spire imports are often all or nothing, in that either everything imports or nothing. And there's a lot to be said for that approach when you're dealing with financial data. But when it comes to UDF data, it will allow you to import the things that verify, and it won't import it, but it definitely won't import the things that don't verify. It's not that forgiving.
It's very powerful, but as I heard say in a movie once upon a time, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So we don't want just anyone kind of mucking around with the data and putting data in and stuff like that. So these validation rules that you have built into this tool are fantastic, but I highly would encourage our friends in the audience to really consider who in the organization, and if it's no one, perhaps just your Spire partner, to work with you on this stuff. This is data, and we know all about the garbage in, garbage out rule, right? So we need to be very careful with that. But I have some questions for you. You talked about how it verifies the changes that you're making without speaking too much in programmer chat. How does that work? How is it validating those changes?
Well, it's Spire's doing that added the very important ability to set up validation on your UDF fields. So if it's a numeric field, you can say that it has to be between this number and this number, or if it's a date field, it has to be within a certain range or after a certain date. So it's all Breeze UDF really is doing is following those rules, because the thing about the API is that you cannot import data with the API that you can't type into the application itself. So I'm just following Spire's wisdom on the benefits of validating UDF data.
But it's a very important aspect, though, right? Like I was saying, in terms of garbage in, garbage out, and really being careful with that kind of data. And you mentioned it backs everything up. What it was before we made these changes. Where's all this data or these sheets being backed up to, Peter?
Well, you can configure that. So if you had multiple users using Breeze UDF, each person would have a folder, and their backups would be in their folder, essentially.
Okay, because in an audit trail of who's doing this kind of stuff. And like I mentioned earlier, you don't just want anyone doing this kind of stuff, but that would be very important, I would imagine.
There's one thing I did want to talk about, which I planned on at an early moment, but I think it's quite important to talk about, and that is how when we talk about customers, and customer has a territory, and when you create an invoice for a customer, it defaults to the customer's territory. So you always know forevermore what was the territory of that customer at the time the sale was made. Even when the territory changes, that invoice will always be that territory. But with UDF fields, that's not the case. So let's say you're doing a commission report, and the value of the commission for the salesperson is 5%. So you can run a report for this month that shows that salesperson's sales, and it looks in his salesperson profile and says, yeah, 5% commission. But when that changes in the future, that 5% has not been permanently recorded against that sale. It's only in the customer profile at the time. So this periodic use of UDF fields would suggest that, well, when you do your commission run for the month, you import into the UDF field for the invoice what the salesperson's commission was at the time. Now you've got captured at the time what was valid, so that a report run later isn't going to change.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I can imagine that our audience members could see this being useful for a variety of different ways. That's the beauty about UDFs is, it does have freedom, right? And so what you could imagine to use them for is really up to anyone at this point. But how you change that data and maintain that on an ongoing basis, this is really a very powerful tool. Peter, thank you so much. Any final thoughts that you want to share with us before we wrap it up?
I was just about to say that although UDF means user definable field, if you put in place the validation processes, and you can add these to reports, and you can synchronize them with other databases, like your vendor's database, because they dictate that data, user-defined field becomes user-defined feature.
Look at you and your alphabet soups and acronyms. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll remind you that there are no Q&As during this podcast style webinar. And if you do have any questions, please reach out to your Spire certified consultant. As I said at the beginning of our session today, many of them are in the audience. They also know Peter Wright and have worked with him in a variety of different ways over the years. So I highly encourage you to reach out to your partner, whether it's having that ability to have dynamic reporting for your financials. I can see a lot of controllers and CFOs making good use of this tool. And then also just being properly organized and how your setup for Spire is per user and user permission. So you can answer those quick questions that come knocking at your door. And then that flexibility of managing UDF. If you don't use user-defined, I can't imagine that you wouldn't, but if you don't use user-defined fields, talk to your partner about incorporating that in your processes, and ask your partner to help further elaborate through something like Breeze UDF as to how that can be managed and maintained going forward, because these are great Spire enhancements, again, whether you're the finance person or a different role within the organization. Peter Wright, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun to work with you on this. I appreciate all the efforts you've put in. And ladies and gentlemen, this is being recorded. You will be able to access it on our website probably within a day or so. I do sincerely appreciate you spending time with us. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day and that everyone stays happy and healthy. And if you're interested, like I said, talk to your partner to reach out to Peter Wright. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.